Welcome to Religion Unpacked. The Shroud of Turin, real burial cloth or medieval fake? It is the most studied artifact in human history. A piece of linen cloth, 4 meters long, bearing the faint, brownish image of a man who appears to have suffered the horrors of crucifixion. For millions of believers, this is the Holy Shroud of Turin, the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. They believe it holds the miraculous photographic imprint of the moment of the resurrection. But for many scientists, it is something else entirely. A brilliant medieval hoax, a masterwork of art created to deceive the faithful. For decades, the battle has raged between those who see a miracle and those who see a fake. In 1988, the world thought the mystery was solved when carbon dating pointed to the Middle Ages. But today, new technology, forensic analysis, and 3D modeling are reopening the case. Today, we are going to unpack the science and the mystery of the Shroud of Turin. How is the image formed? Why does it act like a photographic negative? And what did the latest DNA tests reveal? The shroud lives in a climate-controlled vault in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy. It is rarely shown to the public. When it is, millions of people wait in line for hours just to glimpse it for a few seconds. The image is so faint that it is almost invisible to the naked eye when you stand too close. It wasn't until 1898 that the world realized how strange the shroud really is. An amateur photographer named Secondo Pia took the first photograph of the cloth. When he looked at the glass plate negative in his darkroom, he nearly dropped it in shock. The negative of the photograph showed a clear, detailed, and hauntingly realistic positive image of a man. This meant that the shroud itself was acting like a photographic negative, a concept that didn't exist until the 19th century. How could a medieval artist create an image that only reveals its true detail when inverted by a camera? Forensic pathologists have analyzed the image on the shroud for decades. They found that the man in the cloth suffered injuries that perfectly match the biblical description of the Passion of Christ. There are over 100 whip marks from a Roman flagrum. There are puncture wounds around the scalp, consistent with a crown of thorns. There is a large wound in the side, which looks like it came from a Roman spear. Most interestingly, the nails are driven through the wrists, not the palms. In medieval art, Jesus was always shown with nails through his palms. But modern science knows that the palms cannot support the weight of a body on a cross. The nails must go through the wrists. Whoever created this image, whether naturally or artificially, had a knowledge of anatomy and Roman execution methods that was centuries ahead of its time. In 1988, the Vatican allowed 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona to perform carbon-14 dating on the shroud. The world waited for the results with bated breath. The labs were unanimous. The linen was produced between 1260 and 1390 AD. The headline screamed, "The shroud is a fake!" The case seemed closed. The shroud was labeled a medieval painting. But the mystery refused to die. Researchers soon began to point out flaws in the 1988 test. They claimed the sample was taken from a corner of the cloth that had been repaired and rewoven by medieval nuns after a fire. They argued that the scientists didn't date the original shroud, but a patch of medieval material. While the carbon dating suggested the Middle Ages, other evidence pointed back to the 1st century. Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist, discovered pollen grains embedded in the fibers of the shroud. Many of these pollen types come from plants that only grow in the Middle East, specifically around Jerusalem. Other researchers found traces of this specific type of limestone is rare, but it is an exact match for the limestone found in ancient tombs in Jerusalem. If the shroud was a fake made in Europe, how did these microscopic particles from Israel get there? One of the most incredible properties of the shroud is In the 1970s, scientists used a VP8 image analyzer, a tool used by NASA to map the moon's surface. Normal paintings look distorted when processed this way, but the shroud produced a perfect 3-dimensional relief of a human body. This means the intensity of the image is related to the distance between the cloth and the body. The closer the cloth was to the skin, the darker the image. No painter in history, not even Leonardo da Vinci, could have painted with this kind of mathematical precision. This leads us to the biggest question: how was the image made? There is no paint, no pigment, no ink, and no charcoal on the fibers. The image is only on the very topmost layer of the linen fibers, just a few microns thick. It looks like a controlled scorch, as if the image was scorched onto the cloth by a massive burst of energy. Some physicists have suggested that the image was created by vacuum ultraviolet radiation. In other words, it took a flash of light more powerful than any modern laser to create the shroud's image. To believers, this is the scientific fingerprint of the resurrection, a moment where matter turned into light. Critics, however, point to the historical record. The shroud officially appeared in France in 1354. Before that, its history is murky. Some believe it is the same as the Mandalion of Edessa, a miraculous image of Jesus that disappeared during the sack of Constantinople in 1204. DNA tests in 2015 found that the cloth has been touched by people from all over the world: India, Europe, and the Middle East. It has a complex travel history that we are only just beginning to map. Is the Shroud of Turin a real burial cloth or a medieval fake? After a century of intense study, the answer is still, we don't know. If it's a fake, it is the most sophisticated forgery ever created, one that used photography, 3D mapping, and forensic anatomy 500 years before they were invented. If it's real, it is the only physical evidence of the most famous miracle in history. The shroud remains a provocation to the intelligence, as Pope John Paul II once said. It is a mystery that refuses to be solved, standing exactly at the border where science ends and faith begins. Whether it is a miracle or a masterpiece, the shroud forces us to look into the eyes of history and decide for ourselves. Thank you for watching Religion Unpacked. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss a new upload.